Hi, this is Colleen from the Crafty Basement, and we are here today to make this beautiful card. I'm going to start off with a crumb cake base that measures 8.5 by 5.5, and it's scored at 4 1/4. You'll also need a piece of the Designer Series paper from Home for the Holidays. It's the back side of this gorgeous side, and it has the Christmas Carol music on it. You'll need a scrap of very vanilla so that you can cut out an oval shape from there. You're going to need a quarter sheet of our cardstock vellum, a 1" by 5.5" Versamark ink, Mossy Meadow ink, the oval collections for the Big Shot. You'll also need the stamp set Wonderland that has these wonderful trees and these great little sayings. I think we are ready to go. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is show you vellum and give you a little lesson on the vellum. Okay, vellum is an interesting type paper. It's really pretty. It's got this little opaque type thing going on with it. But what's also interesting about it, it has what I call a curl factor. And basically it wants to curl in a certain direction. You want to make sure that your stamping is going to be on the side that is the curved side. Because when and if your cardstock does curl, you'll be able to flatten it out on your paper and have it sit like that. If it was curled the other way, the sides would curl up like this and it would be very hard to attach it to your card. So we're right now going to ink up our trees, and I'm going to be using the Mossy Meadow. Another little tip that I'll give to you is that when you're inking a stamp of this size, just because it's bigger than your palm, you want to take the stamp pad and bring it to the stamp so that you can make sure that you get the middle of your stamp inked up. The other thing, when you're finished inking, you're going to look to see if it's all shiny, and it is. The next thing you're going to notice or look for is to see if there's any ink on the edges of your stamp. You do want to take that off because you don't want those ugly little outlines on your paper that you're stamping on. Okay, so I do use my fingers, and then I wipe my fingers on the towel, mainly because it's a lot easier than using the towel. So I'll just make sure there's no ink on there. Okay. Again, I'm going to make sure that my cardstock vellum is that way, and I'm going to bring my stamp directly down onto my paper. I am not going to rock my stamp back and forth. I'm just going to put it down and then press firmly. And again, because it is a larger stamp, I want to make sure that my middle is pressed down so that I do get the image as we want it. And there it is. Another thing you'd want to know about vellum is that when you do stamp with the ink, any kind of our ink, it is going to stay wet longer. So you're either going to have to use the embossing tool or the heat gun, as I usually call it, so to dry the ink, or you will just put it aside. And that's what we're going to do here, is just put it aside. So with the front of the cardstock here, the crumb cake cardstock, what I'm going to do is with the Versamark, I'm going to just take the word stamp that says all is calm, all is bright, and basically just use it as a watermark to make a background all over. And what you all know, or if you don't, Versamark is a watermark ink, so it's really great because what happens is it takes on the color of the cardstock that you're using. So it's also great for embossing. So if you like to emboss, it's probably the best because it's the stickiest, and it holds the embossing ink on to the paper so that you can... Okay, now I'll bring this back after it dries because it darkens up after it dries. Basically, that just gives a nice dimension to the back of your card. Okay, then we're going to take our 1 inch by 5.5, and we're going to put our sentiment on there with the artichoke ink again. So again, I'm going to very carefully tap, tap, tap to make sure that my image, I do not want to, watch what happens when I squish this. If I squish and squish and squish, your whole word stamp is going to be full of ink. Well, you don't really want that, because then when you ink your paper, you're going to end up with all this icky stuff over here. Plus, it's a waste of ink. So let me wipe this off and show you again. All you need to do is a slight tap, tap, tap. Turn it over to make sure it's shiny, and it is. You want to make sure that none of the edges are showing. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is find the center of my strip of paper, and I'm going to press. Okay, nicely done. Close up my ink pad. I'm going to take our banner punch, which has 3 different sizes, a 1 inch, 1.5 inch, and a 2 inch. I'm going to slide the Silent Night all the way in, and then I'm going to slide it again and punch it, and you'll see I have Silent Night nicely centered on my strip of paper. I'm going to put that off to the side. Okay, one of the other things I'm going to do, and what I'm basically right now is doing is waiting for my vellum trees to dry, and they're not quite dry yet. So one of the other things that I want to do is take my ink, and I'm going to take one of our sponges, and I'm going to lightly sponge the edges of my Silent Night. I also want to sponge the edges of my music paper. This again just adds a little bit dimension, just these little touches that you do, whether you use dimensionals or whether you sponge the edges of your papers. It just gives it just a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, but whatever it is, it's cool. I'm going to be bringing this paper in. If you can see, the words are a little bit darker on here. And lightly sponge the edges on here. I do so quickly. Okay, now that all of our pieces are sponged, I'm going to take a minute here, and I'm going to go dry our vellum. Okay, so I'm back, and another thing that you can do with the vellum, rather than put it aside and let it dry, or to use the heat gun to dry the ink, is that you could put clear embossing powder over the top and then melt the powder, and that keeps it from smearing as well. And that's what I ended up doing with this. Then I don't know if I mentioned that the embossing folder that we're going to be using is the Gently Falling. Now this is one of the things that is being a holdover from our holiday catalog into our spring catalog, and I really like it because it has concentrated dots on the top, and then it kind of gradually moves down here. I'll also mention that I chose to do the inking and embossing first before I put it through the embossing folder, because if I had tried to stamp on the dots, it would have been not as nice of an image, because the dots would have gotten in the way of the ink. I'd like to also mention that when you put this in, you want to make sure that the words are on the outside, or facing up is what I really meant to say. And I'll go put this through the Big Shot now. Okay, so what I have done is I cut out the trees from the vellum, and I had then also got this stuck to the paper. Used the smaller of the ovals to cut out the very vanilla, and I then adhered the vellum onto the very vanilla by using mini glue dots. And I put one up here underneath the tree, I put one here, and I put one here. And you cannot see it through the vellum then, which was a little trick there that you can learn from. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to be putting this Silent Night onto here. And I dimensional it out, put dimensionals on there to pop it out. And it goes onto there. And then the very last, one of the last things I did was I took this music piece, making sure that the words were upright, and I glued it on using our mono adhesive. And I would then have put more dimensionals on the back of here and placed it right here on our card. I think this card is just way cool. It's not very hard. It takes a lot of steps, but it's not that hard. It is more, it has a little bit to it, not a whole lot of bling, but I really, really like it a lot. Please visit my website, www.thecraftybasement.com, so that you can order products that you would need to make this card. You'll also have the dimensions on there as well. I hope you all have a good week, and thanks so much for stopping by today.